I sat there in the kitchen so quiet it was suffocating my hands clutching a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The almond cookies I had meticulously baked the night before lay silently on the porcelain plate untouched by anyone. The clock showed 7 p.m., the moment when Thomas would usually walk through the door with a gentle smile bringing a warmth that melted away all my worries. But tonight he didn't come, and he would never come again. I stared at the front door, as if by staring long enough I would hear the sound of a key turning in the lock. But there was only silence, a silence that seeped into my bones, as if the whole world knew something had been lost forever. I am Vivian Carter, a name once tied to punctual dinners, bouquets of roses on Sundays, and a marriage everyone thought was perfect. For 15 years, I believed Thomas and I were two pieces of a predestined puzzle fitting together perfectly in the picture of life. He was a calm, successful man whose mere presence made any room feel steady. He never raised his voice, never missed an appointment, and never gave me cause to worry about bills or the future. We had no children, but life flowed gently like a serene river without a single ripple. I thought that was happiness. But now, sitting here in the house that was once our home, I felt a void, not just Thomas's absence, but a crack in my very beliefs. Thomas died on a Thursday. The doctor called it a severe myocardial infarction. He passed quickly, the doctor said, with a face both sympathetic and detached, as if he had repeated those words hundreds of times. I nodded, as if I understood, as if it could ease the pain. But it didn't. When you lose the person you thought knew you best, no words of comfort can mend the wound. The funeral passed like a hazy dream filled with black suits, polite condolences, and unfamiliar faces, telling me how wonderful Thomas was. I clung to Claire, my best friend from college, who kept pressing glasses of water I didn't drink and plates of food I couldn't swallow into my hands. Claire was my only anchor, with her messy blonde hair and eyes that always knew when I needed silence. But then Rachel, my sister, appeared. The scent of her perfume was cloyingly sweet, her hug lingering longer than necessary. "I'm so sorry, sis," she whispered, her voice smooth as silk. Thomas was like a brother to me. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But there was something in Rachel's eyes, not grief, but a cold, calculating glint, as if she were measuring my reaction. That night, as Rachel poured wine in my kitchen, she blurted out, "Hey sis, I know it's not the time, but Thomas lent me some money. I want to settle that now that you're settled." I was stunned. "What money?" I asked. Rachel blinked, then laughed as if I were joking. "Oh, he must not have told you." A sharp pain twisted in my chest. Thomas never kept secrets from me, or so I thought. That night's sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I wandered through the house, touching objects as if they could tell me the truth. The bookshelf, the polished wooden floor, the carefully framed wedding photo, all suddenly felt foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. Then I saw them, Thomas's keys, still lying on the hallway table, where he left them before he was gone forever. I picked them up, and among the familiar keys, there was one that was strange, oddly shaped, unlike any house or car key. The key to the garage, a place he forbade me from entering. "Nothing interesting in there," he used to say with that gentle smile. "Just tools, grease. You wouldn't like it." I never pressed him. I never had to. That was how our marriage worked. Easy, comfortable, and full of silences I wasn't allowed to touch. But now, with Thomas gone, those silences were no longer boundaries. They were invitations. I gripped the key tightly, feeling its sharp edges dig into my palm. My mind swirled with questions, but one truth was undeniable: I needed to know. No matter how painful the truth was, I needed to know who the man I loved really was. A small fire began to kindle inside me, not just grief, but resolve. If Thomas had hidden something from me, I would find it. And if his world was built on lies, I would tear it apart piece by piece. Because I am Vivian Carter, and I wasn't born to be deceived. The garage door was heavy, as if it were trying to guard the secrets within. I stood there in the old industrial district of Charleston, where crumbling brick buildings and rusted tin roofs rose like relics of a forgotten time. Weeds pushed through cracks in the asphalt, and the air carried the dusty scent of oil and machinery. This wasn't a place for someone like Thomas, the man who always wore tailored suits whose smile put everyone at ease. But every Thursday he came here as regular as clockwork. I never asked why. I never thought I needed to. But now, with the strange key biting into my palm, I knew I had no other choice. I had lost Thomas, but I wouldn't lose the truth. I pushed the key into the lock, hearing the metal groan like a warning. My heart pounded, threatening to break through my chest. Part of me wanted to turn back, to return to the safety of the kitchen, to cold tea and memories I once believed were real. But I had gone too far to stop. The door swung open and the darkness inside swallowed me. I fumbled for the light switch, and when the fluorescent lights flickered on, I nearly stopped breathing. This wasn't a garage, it was a shrine to a life I never knew existed. The four walls were covered with photographs, clipped newspaper articles, handwritten charts, and travel maps pinned with rusty tacks. Every inch of space told a story, but it wasn't my story. I stepped inside, my legs trembling as if the floor could collapse at any moment. The photos were neatly arranged, like an obsessive collection. And in every photo, Thomas appeared, but not my Thomas. Not the man in crisp shirts and polished smiles. This was a different Thomas in faded jeans, hair mussed with an ease in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. He stood next to a woman, always her. She was younger than me, maybe by a decade, with sleek black hair and eyes sharp as knives. They were close, too close. Her hand rested on his arm and he leaned toward her, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. I touched a photo, my fingers trembling as they traced the handwritten note on the back. Isabel and Logan, August 2024. August 2024. That day I was at home, slaving over the beef stew Thomas loved, waiting for him to return from a client meeting. But he wasn't there. He was here in this photo, beaming beside Isabel, and a young man, Logan, like a happy family. I felt my knees buckle, and I gripped the cold metal table for support. I sat down, my head slick with sweat, feeling as if the world were crumbling beneath me. My trembling hands flipped through the files on the table. Bank statements, corporate records, letters from foreign companies, none of them related to the work I knew Thomas did. A medical report chilled me to the bone: Crescent Heart Institute, ischemic heart disease, stage 3, risk of sudden death. Thomas knew. He knew he was dying, but instead of telling me, he spent his final days building this secret world. I found another folder filled with bank transfers, offshore accounts, and a company I'd never heard of, Mercury South Holdings. The numbers, dates, and signatures piled up like a labyrinth of guilt. This wasn't just personal betrayal, this was a web of lies, possibly illegal, that Thomas had woven behind my back. I stepped back, my breaths short and ragged. This room wasn't just a secret, it was a bomb. Each photo, each document was a knife to my heart, but also a challenge. Thomas had lived 2 lives, and I was only half the story. Isabel, Logan, Mercury South Holdings, who were they? What were they to him? I looked at the last photo where the 3 of them smiled like a family. Was Logan Thomas's son? Was Isabel his true love? I didn't know. But I knew this: the truth was a jagged path, and I had stepped onto it. There was no turning back. The anger in me flared, mingling with the pain. I was Vivian Carter, a wife, an American woman raised to believe that justice would prevail, that truth was a torch to light the darkness. Thomas may have thought I was weak, that I would never dare enter his world. But he was wrong. I gripped the key tightly, feeling its weight like a promise. These secrets wouldn't bury me. They would be my weapon. I wouldn't let Thomas's betrayal define me. I would define myself, step by step, until those like him paid for underestimating the strength of a wounded woman. The fluorescent light in the garage flickered, as if the room itself were trying to hide something. I stood there, hands clinging to the edge of the cold metal table, my mind reeling with the photos, the notes, and the truth that Thomas, the man I called my husband for 15 years, had not only betrayed me, but built another family. Isabel, Logan. Names that were foreign, yet sharp as knives carving into my heart. I wanted to scream, to smash everything in this room, but my feet were frozen, trapped by the weight of the truth. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, hesitant, as if someone didn't want to be noticed. My heart pounded, my chest tightening. I spun around, and in the dim doorway a figure appeared. He was young, maybe in his mid-20s, with dark hair and sharp eyes that mirrored Thomas's so closely it took my breath away. He stepped inside slowly, cautiously, as if he knew each step could shatter the fragile world I was trying to hold together. Vivian Carter. His voice rang out calm, but carrying a strange weight, as if he had prepared for this moment his entire life. I didn't answer right away. My mouth was dry, and for a moment I wanted to run, to return to the life where Thomas was still the perfect husband, where I didn't have to face a stranger with his eyes. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling but firm. He took another step, the light revealing his face. "I'm Logan Myers," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "Thomas Carter was my father." The world seemed to stop. I felt the floor shift beneath me, as if the room with all its secrets were swallowing me whole. I gripped the table harder, as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling into an abyss. "You're really his son," I whispered, my voice breaking. Logan nodded without hesitation. "Yes. And I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this." I looked at him, truly looked at him. And in those eyes I saw Thomas. Not the Thomas from the photos beaming beside Isabel, but my Thomas with that deep gaze that always held a part of his soul I could never reach. "How long have you known about me?" I asked, my voice faint as a dying breath. "My whole life," Logan replied, his voice not apologetic, just raw truth. "Dad didn't say much, only that he had a wife that you didn't know about me. He kept us completely separate. My mother Isabel respected that. She didn't want to interfere." His mother, Isabel, the woman in the photos with the smile that made Thomas glow. "Where is she?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "She passed away last year," Logan said, his voice lowering. "After that, everything changed." I sat down on the dusty chair near the table, my legs too weak to stand. Isabel was dead, like Thomas, leaving Logan and me, two strangers bound by a web of lies. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Why now?" Logan pulled a folded, yellowed piece of paper from his backpack and handed it to me. I hesitated, then opened it. It was a draft will handwritten by Thomas in the familiar script I'd seen on birthday cards and dinner notes. It wasn't notarized, just lines dividing assets mentioning Logan, a company called Mercury South Holdings, and a sentence that made my heart clench. "Access to the remaining documents in the office safe. Code linked to the personal gift for V. The personal gift. The sapphire necklace he gave me 2 nights before he died, the necklace I left at home because it was too heavy to wear. Now it was heavier, not just a gift, but a key." "What's Mercury South Holdings?" I asked, my eyes still glued to the paper. Logan took a deep breath. "A secret company of Dad's. Not public, not on any records. He used it to move money overseas. After my mom died, I started digging. There were transfers I couldn't trace, offshore accounts in my name that I didn't open. I think he was trying to protect something for you, for me, for all of us. My mouth went dry. Protect or hide? I looked around the room at the photos, the documents, as if they could answer. You said Thomas knew his time was running out. You said he didn't trust the people he worked with. Who are they? Logan shook his head, his eyes darkening. He didn't give names. Just said if something happened to him, people would come looking for information, for leverage, for what he left behind. I stood up, my legs still trembling but my heart ablaze. Thomas hadn't just betrayed me, he had pulled me into a dangerous game, a world of shadows and power I wasn't prepared to face. But I was no longer the dutiful wife, the one who cooked dinner on time and smiled when handed flowers. I was Vivian Carter. And if Thomas thought I would crumble under his secrets, he was wrong. I looked at Logan, the son with his father's eyes, and I knew that, like it or not, we were allies now. I need to go home, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need that necklace. Logan nodded, his eyes reflecting something, not compassion, but the empathy of those betrayed together. I can come with you if you'll let me. I hesitated, then nodded. Because whether I wanted it or not, this was our story now. The story of those left behind who had to find a way to rise from the ashes of a man who lived two lives. And deep down I felt a fire, not just anger, but the pride of an American woman forged by challenges, ready to fight injustice, even if it came from the person she loved most. I left the garage with a heavy heart, Thomas's secret key still biting into my palm, a reminder that everything I once believed was a lie. Logan walked beside me, silent, but present, a stranger with my husband's eyes. We didn't talk much on the way to Claire's house, where I sought refuge, where I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning in my own past. The sapphire necklace sat in my pocket, no longer the gift of love I once thought it was, but a key to deeper secrets. But before I could open any more doors, there was someone I needed to confront: Rachel, my sister, who had planted the seed of doubt with her vague comment about Thomas's loan. I called Claire as soon as I left the garage. Within 20 minutes, I was sitting on her sofa, clutching a hot mug of tea I didn't drink. The sapphire necklace lay on the table between us, glinting under the lamplight like a ticking time bomb. Claire didn't ask questions, just looked at me with patient eyes, as if she knew I needed time to piece together the wreckage in my mind. When I told her about the garage, the photos of Isabel and Logan, the draft will, she only held my hand and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Viv." But I didn't want pity. I wanted answers. And more than anything, I wanted someone to pay for the lies that had torn my life apart. I drove to Rachel's apartment, a sleek building in North Charleston with an underground parking garage, coded gates, and concierge service. Strange, I thought, for someone who always complained about being broke. The anger in me flared with every floor the elevator climbed, like a fire fed with fuel. Rachel opened the door barefoot in silk pajamas, holding a glass of wine. Her hair was perfectly curled, as if she were expecting company. "Oh, Viv, my widowed sister," she said with a smug smile. "Here to check on the wife's inheritance." "Don't play games, Rachel," I snapped, pushing past her into the living room. My eyes landed on a framed photo on the shelf. Rachel and Thomas beaming, raising champagne glasses. The corner of the photo noted the date, 5 years ago. My heart clenched. "What's this?" I pointed at the frame, my voice trembling with rage. Rachel sauntered over, sipping her wine, her voice light as air. "Oh, that's a company party. You were too tired to go, remember? Thomas invited me along." She spoke as if it were nothing, as if drinking champagne with my husband while I folded laundry at home was no big deal. "How close were you and him, Rachel?" I asked, turning to face her head on. Her smile faltered just for a second, but enough for me to know I'd struck something. I stepped closer, my voice low but icy. "I know about Isabel. I know about Logan, the garage, the fake company, the will. I know everything. If there's more, tell me now." Rachel narrowed her eyes, walked to the bar, poured another glass, then turned back. "Fine. You want the truth?" She set the glass down, her hand brushing her stomach. "I'm pregnant," Thomas's child. The world stopped. I didn't breathe, didn't move. My brain froze, unable to process what I'd heard. 10 weeks. Rachel continued, her voice calm as if discussing the weather. I found out a week before he died. He promised to take care of everything. He even said he'd leave Isabel. I felt the blood rush to my face. You were still seeing him after Isabel died? I asked, my voice shaking with the fury building inside me. Rachel shrugged as if it were no big deal. Isabel wasn't long-term. I was the one who stayed. I didn't realize I'd raised my hand until my palm struck her cheek. The slap echoed sharp and clear, and Rachel's wineglass crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just smiled, a cold, calculated smile. Now that's the real Vivian, she said. Not the perfect wife, but the woman who just found out she's been living a lie. I turned away, my breaths heavy, my hands trembling. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice small. Because you wouldn't have believed me, Rachel replied. You always thought I was jealous. And maybe I was. But this isn't about you. This is about me, about finally having something for myself. I shook my head, feeling the world crumble again. You didn't just take something, you stole everything. But as Rachel stepped closer, her eyes shifted, becoming unreadable. Say what you want, but the baby in my belly is your family, whether you like it or not. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to break things, to rewind time so I wouldn't have to face this truth. Instead, I said, I'll honor Thomas's will. Not for you, but for the baby, because it didn't choose to be born into this mess. Rachel blinked, her voice softening for the first time. You mean that? I don't know what I'm thinking, I whispered, but I know I need to leave. I walked out, ignoring the crunch of broken glass under my feet. When Rachel called my name, I didn't turn back. I couldn't, because I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I didn't go home that night. The house, with its neatly stacked dishes and untouched bed, now felt like a mausoleum preserving the memories of a false marriage. Instead, I returned to Claire's, clutching the sapphire necklace as if it could burn my skin. Claire opened the door, looked into my eyes, and said only, "You need to sleep." But sleep was the last thing I could do, with every corner of my mind collapsing. I sat on Claire's sofa, my gaze fixed on the necklace. It wasn't just a gift, it was the door to the next truth, and I was terrified of what lay behind it. But I also knew I couldn't stop. Rachel had stolen a piece of my life, but she wasn't the only one. Thomas had left a web of lies, and now I held the key both literally and figuratively. I was Vivian Carter, an American woman forged by the truth that no one has the right to steal your strength, whether they're your husband or your sister. I wouldn't let them win. Not Rachel, not Thomas's secrets, not anyone. I would uncover the whole truth, and I would make those who thought they could manipulate me pay. I left Rachel's apartment with a fire burning in my chest, not just anger, but a cold resolve. The sapphire necklace sat in my pocket, heavy as a curse, but I knew it was the key not just to a door, but to the entire truth about Thomas, about the double life he'd built behind my back. Claire met me at the door, her eyes sharp, saying, "You're not opening your husband's secret safe without me." Logan stood there silent. His eyes, Thomas's eyes, reflecting a resolve I was learning to rely on. We were a team now, not out of affection, but because the truth had bound us to the same path. We drove through Charleston's bustling streets to a high-rise where Thomas once called his secondary office. He always said it was just for private meetings, nothing special. I had never set foot there, never thought I needed to. But now, as Logan swiped an access card through the security scanner, I felt like I was stepping into another world, cold, foreign, and full of secrets Thomas had carefully hidden. The receptionist didn't even look up, as if our presence was expected. Thomas had built a perfectly compartmentalized life, unquestioned by anyone. The elevator took us to the 14th floor, each ding like a heartbeat. Thomas's office appeared behind a glass door, a modern space with cold, gray furniture devoid of warmth. No wedding photos, no mementos, just sleek surfaces and a strange masculine cologne I'd never smelled on Thomas. I felt like an intruder in my own life, Logan pointed to an abstract painting behind the desk. "The safe's behind that," he said, his voice low but certain. I pulled out the sapphire necklace, my fingers tracing the gleaming stone. I twisted the clasp counterclockwise, and a small click sounded. A hidden compartment popped open, revealing a thin metal plate like a SIM card etched with tiny numbers. Logan took it, handling it like a bomb, and inserted it into the safe's keypad. A low beep, then the safe door swung open with a soft but ominous sound. Inside, there was no gold, no cash, no flashy items like in the movies, just neatly stacked files, a sleek black USB drive, a small wooden box, and a silver key tagged Federal Trust Bank Safe Deposit Box. Logan flipped through the files, contracts, bank transfers, financial reports, all tied to international banks and Mercury South Holdings. The numbers and signatures overlapped, painting a picture of a shady financial network beyond anything I could imagine. This wasn't just personal betrayal, it was a criminal empire Thomas had been part of, perhaps even orchestrated. I opened the wooden box, and my heart stopped. Inside was a simple gold ring set with a small diamond. It wasn't mine. I turned the ring, and the inscription inside took my breath away. In forever. And not V, not Vivian. Isabel. God, Claire whispered beside me, her hand over her mouth. Logan looked away, his jaw tight, as if he couldn't bear another wound. He bought a ring for her. I said, my voice so soft it was barely audible. He was going to propose, or maybe he already had. Then Logan handed me a letter folded neatly with my name on the front. Thomas's handwriting as familiar as the notes he left on the kitchen counter. I opened it, my hands trembling. Vivian, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry. I didn't have the courage to tell you the truth, to say the things I should have said years ago. I was selfish. I built 2 lives because I couldn't let go of either. And in the end, that cost me everything. I love you. I know that sounds hollow now, but I loved you in the only way I knew how. I wanted you to be at peace, to be safe. That's why I left these documents, the access, the truth. Use them as you see fit. Burn them, bury them, or expose everything. That's your choice. Forgive me if you can. If not, I understand. Thomas. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. I handed it to Claire, then Logan. No one spoke. No words could capture the devastation in that room. Thomas, the man I thought I knew, had become a stranger, not just a cheater, but a player in a dangerous game of power and money. But in that devastation, I felt something else: strength. These documents, the USB, the bank key, they weren't just proof of Thomas's betrayal. They were weapons. I was no longer the grieving widow weeping at the kitchen table. I was Vivian Carter, an American woman forged by the truth that no one has the right to manipulate or control you, no matter how clever they are. Thomas thought he could live 2 lives without paying a price. But now I held his legacy, and I would decide how to use it. I looked at Logan, his eyes steady but full of hurt. "We're not done," I said, my voice stronger than ever. "There's still the bank safe. We have to find out what's in it." Logan nodded, and Claire squeezed my hand. We left the office in silence, not out of peace, but because we knew what lay ahead would be even more dangerous. But I wasn't afraid, not anymore. Because I had learned one thing: when you face the truth, no matter how painful, you become stronger. And I, Vivian Carter, was becoming someone even Thomas couldn't have foreseen. I stepped out of Thomas's office, the cold hallway lights of the high-rise threatening to swallow me. The bank key sat in my coat pocket, heavy as a warning, while the USB and documents from the safe were clutched tightly in Logan's hands as if they were the last thread tying us to the man who had betrayed us both. Claire walked beside me, her sharp eyes scanning every corner like a sentinel. "We need a plan, Viv," she said, her voice low but firm. "These aren't just papers, they're a ticking time bomb." I knew she was right. The documents, the USB, and the ring inscribed with N weren't just proof of Thomas's betrayal. They were clues to a far more dangerous world where power and money were played like a ruthless chess game. I felt their weight not just in my hands but in every heartbeat. But I was no longer the woman trembling in the kitchen clutching cold tea. I was Vivian Carter, and if Thomas's world thought it could crush me, they were about to learn they'd picked the wrong opponent. That night at Claire's, I had just set the bank key on the table when my phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Vivian Carter, a male voice said, calm as still water before a storm. I'm Gordon Blake, your husband's business associate. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, you do, he replied, his voice cold as steel. The documents in the safe. Some involve international accounts I helped set up. I suggest we meet. I'm not meeting anyone, I said, gripping the phone. You will. Gordon said, his tone still even but laced with menace. Because the others Thomas worked with aren't as polite as I am. They don't ask. He hung up, leaving me with the thud of my heartbeat in my chest. I looked at Logan, who sat across from me, his eyes darkening. He called me too, he said, his voice low. But it gets worse. Last night, someone else called. He handed me a scrap of paper with the name Victor Crane. He said he's the source of the money Thomas moved. He said if we don't return everything by the end of the week, there will be consequences. I didn't ask what the consequences were. I didn't need to. I felt the darkness tightening around me like an invisible hand choking my future. But I wasn't afraid, not the way I used to be. The anger in me had transformed into something else, an iron will forged by the pride of an American woman who refused to bow to those who thought they could use power to crush me. The next morning, Logan and I met with Marcus Doyle, my family's lawyer since my father's days. Marcus was a no-nonsense man allergic to drama with a knack for turning legal chaos into order. I told him everything. Not the affair, not Rachel, but the legally relevant parts, the documents, the USB, and the threats from Gordon Blake and Victor Crane. He didn't blink. Do you want to sue? He asked, his voice as calm as if he were asking whether I wanted coffee or tea. No, I replied. I want insurance. Marcus nodded as if he'd expected that answer. We'll make copies of everything, digital and hard copies. Store them in 3 places, one here, one with you, and one with someone unrelated to you. Claire gave a faint smile, her eyes lighting up. I know the perfect person, she said, her voice full of meaning. We spent hours scanning documents. What Thomas left behind wasn't just evidence of shady dealings, it was a global criminal network with fake invoices, secret transfers, and names I never wanted to know. Thomas thought that when he died, it would all vanish. He was wrong. I was wrong to think he was just an unfaithful husband. He was part of something bigger, more dangerous, and now I held the key to bringing it down. When everything was backed up, Marcus drafted a short letter to Gordon Blake's office sent via courier. I added a line in my own handwriting. Test me VC. 15 minutes later, Gordon called back. You think you're clever? He growled. You're digging your own grave. No, I replied, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. You're the one digging a grave. Because my next call is to the IRS and then Interpol. I heard him suck in a breath, then laugh, a forced, nervous laugh that didn't hide his unease. Fine, he said. What do you want? Nothing, I said. I just want you to stop. No calls, no threats, no midnight warnings. If you or anyone touches me or anyone I know, every file, every signature goes public. You don't want that kind of trouble. I'm already in trouble, I added, my voice unwavering. The difference is, I'm not afraid of it anymore. He hung up. 2 hours later, Victor Crane called. His voice was smooth, polished, like an old friend unlocking a door with charm. Vivian, he said as if we were old acquaintances. I hear about your discoveries. I think we're starting off on the wrong foot. There's no wrong foot, I cut him off. Just your signature on a dozen illegal transactions. I let the silence stretch, letting him feel its weight. I know you think you can handle this, but here's the thing, Mr. Crane. I have no reputation to lose, no company to protect. I have nothing left of the life I thought I had, and that makes me very, very dangerous." He was silent, and I hung up. I felt adrenaline surge through me like an electric current. For the first time since Thomas died, I didn't feel like a victim. I was the one in control, and I wouldn't let men like Gordon Blake or Victor Crane, men who thought they could manipulate with money and power, underestimate me. I was Vivian Carter, an American woman forged by the belief that justice isn't something you beg for, it's something you take. I looked at Logan standing on Claire's porch, his eyes reflecting a newfound respect. "We're not done," I said, gripping the bank key. "There's still the safe deposit box. We have to find out what's in it." Logan nodded, and I knew that no matter how dangerous the road ahead, I wouldn't walk it alone. But I also knew that men like Gordon and Crane wouldn't let go easily. They were part of the world Thomas built, and now I stood between them and their secrets. I wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. Because I had learned that in this country, you don't just survive, you fight, and you fight to win. I sat on Claire's sofa, the dim light from the table lamp casting shadows that danced on the walls as if retelling the chaotic story of my life. The sleek black USB drive lay on the table, small but heavy, as if it held an entire world I wasn't ready to face. Logan sat beside me, his eyes steady but tense like a soldier bracing for battle. Claire brought a tray of tea, but no one touched it. No one spoke. The air in the room was thick, as if we all knew that what lay in the USB would change everything again. I had delayed this for 2 days. 2 days to steel myself to convince myself I could handle another blow from Thomas. 2 days to rehearse my emotions as if that could soften the sting of betrayal. But now, as I plugged the USB into Claire's laptop, my fingers trembled on the trackpad. A folder appeared containing a single file. For Vivian. The date on the file was 10 days before Thomas died. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest tighten, and clicked. The screen went black, then flared to life. Thomas appeared, but not the Thomas. I knew not the man in tailored suits or the husband smiling across the dinner table. This was a haggard Thomas, his eyes weary, his shirt wrinkled as if he hadn't slept in weeks. He sat against a plain white wall, harsh light accentuating the lines on his face. "Vivian," he began, his voice hoarse as if each word fought to escape. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, or I've run out of time." I felt my heart clench like an invisible hand was squeezing it. Thomas continued rubbing his face, his hands trembling slightly. "There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. You weren't the one I needed to hide things from. You were the one I wanted to protect. But I waited too long, and now everything is falling apart." He paused, his eyes locking onto the camera as if seeing through me. "There's someone you need to be careful of, someone you trust more than you should." My heart slowed as if it knew what was coming. "It's Rachel." Claire's living room froze. Claire covered her mouth. Logan clenched his fists, but I couldn't move. Thomas went on, his voice shaking. "She wasn't just a mistake of mine. It's not that simple. Rachel planned it from the start. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. The night I told her I couldn't continue, she changed. She said if I left her, she'd expose everything, the money, the fake accounts, everything I'd buried to keep you safe." My mouth went dry. Thomas leaned closer to the camera, his voice urgent. "I think she killed Isabel. I can't prove it, but the timing was too perfect. Isabel had packed her bags, told me she'd booked a one-way ticket to Lisbon. Then the car accident, a single vehicle, no witnesses. They said the brakes failed, but she'd just had the car serviced the day before. Rachel knew she was pregnant. Isabel didn't. That's what changed everything." Claire let out a small sob, and I heard Logan's knuckles crack as he clenched his fists tighter. I just sat there motionless, as if my body refused to process what I'd heard. Thomas looked into the camera, his eyes wet. "I tried to fix it. I moved money, made backups, ensured that if something happened to me, you'd have the power. I'm sorry I let it go this far to do the right thing. The screen froze, then went black. I sat there motionless, feeling as if time had stopped. Rachel. Not just the sister who betrayed me, not just the woman who slept with my husband, but a manipulator, possibly a murderer. Thomas knew. He knew how dangerous Rachel was, knew she could destroy everything. But he kept silent, let me live in the lie. And now he'd handed me the truth not as a gift, but as a burden. I looked at Logan, seeing the anger flare in his eyes, but also a deep pain. Isabel. His mother didn't die in a random accident. She may have been taken by the same woman, carrying Thomas's child. I looked at Claire, who was fighting back tears, and I knew she felt the weight of this moment too. But I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I'd passed the point of breaking. I'd been betrayed, deceived, but now I held something stronger, the truth. I stood up, my legs steadier than I expected. Rachel doesn't know we have this, I said, my voice low but certain. She thinks she's won. Logan nodded, his eyes sharp as steel. What do we do next? I looked at the USB, small but powerful. We keep it safe. And we make her pay, not by stooping to her level, but by letting her trip over herself. I felt the fire in me, not just anger, but pride, the pride of an American woman forged by the belief that no one has the right to manipulate or destroy you, whether they're family or foe. Rachel might think she controlled this game, but she didn't know I'd learned how to play, and I played to win. I turned to Claire. Call Marcus, I said. We need to make sure that if anything happens to me or Logan, this goes public. Claire nodded, her eyes blazing with a resolve I'd never seen. Logan placed a hand on my shoulder, a small gesture, but heavy with meaning. We weren't just Thomas's victims, we were survivors, and we would fight. Not for revenge, but for justice. For Isabel. For ourselves. And for a truth that no one, not even Rachel, could bury. I sat on Claire's porch, the morning sun filtering through the trees, glinting off the glass of sweet tea on the table. But the light couldn't dispel the darkness swirling in my heart. Thomas's video echoed in my mind, each word a blade, carving the truth about Rachel, my sister, who not only betrayed me, but might be a killer. I gripped the USB in my pocket, feeling its weight like a promise of justice. Rachel thought she'd won, that she could manipulate me, Thomas, and the world, but today I would show her she was wrong. I called Rachel, inviting her to brunch, my voice soft as if I wanted to mend our sisterly bond. We should talk like real sisters, I said, and she agreed, her tone brimming with confidence, like someone who thought they'd already secured victory. When she arrived in a pale green dress, hugging her pregnant belly, her smile radiant like an actor on stage, I hugged her, letting her feel my false warmth. He kicks when I drink orange juice, Rachel said, giggling her hand, rubbing her belly as if flaunting a trophy. I smiled back, but my eyes were cold as ice. We sat on the porch, just the two of us, with Claire quietly preparing tea before retreating inside. Logan stayed in the house, waiting ready if I needed him. I'm glad you called, Rachel said, folding her hands neatly in her lap, her eyes gleaming with smugness. I was worried you were mad at me. Why would I be mad? I asked, my voice soft but sharp as a hidden blade. Because you slept with my husband, or because he left part of his estate to you? Rachel blinked, her smile faltering, the first crack in her perfect facade. She leaned back, trying to regain composure. Vivian, this has been hard for both of us. Thomas was torn, conflicted, but he loved you. No, I cut her off, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto hers. He didn't love you, he pitied you, and he was afraid of me. Rachel froze, her face hardening, her eyes narrowing like a cornered animal. I placed the USB on the table between us, small but menacing. I know about the accounts about your manipulation. I know he was going to leave you, and I know about Isabel. Rachel didn't blink, didn't breathe, but her lips parted slightly, just enough for me to see the panic flash in her eyes. You can't prove anything, she said, her voice low but trembling. I don't need to prove anything, I replied, my voice calm but brimming with power. Because I'm not taking this to court. I'm not going to sue or fight for justice in a half-baked system. I stood, staring straight into her eyes. I'm walking away, leaving you here with everything you think you wanted. The money, the baby, the lies. But you'll live with them, Rachel, and they'll weigh on you every single day. Rachel shot up, her eyes flashing with anger mixed with fear. You think that scares me? No, I said, my voice cold as steel. But it will. I turned, walking inside, leaving her standing there alone, with her crumbling victory smile. Logan was waiting in the living room, his eyes reflecting quiet respect. You did it, he said, his voice low. You faced her. Not enough, I replied, handing the USB to Claire. Call Marcus. We need to make sure it's safe. That afternoon, I met Marcus Doyle at his office. I gave him the USB, a signed affidavit, and one instruction: if anything happens to me, make it public. Marcus nodded, his eyes sharp but non-judgmental. You sure, Vivian? This is a big step. I'm sure, I replied, my voice unwavering. I'm not running anymore. I'm not letting them, Rachel Gordon Crane, or anyone think they can control me. I left Marcus's office with a strange feeling, not relief, but freedom. For the first time since Thomas died, I felt in control, not a pawn in someone else's game. Rachel might think she'd won, but she didn't know I'd seen the video, heard Thomas's warning, held the evidence that could ruin her. But I didn't choose revenge, not because I was weak, but because I was stronger than that. I chose to let her face the consequences of her own actions, to live with what she'd done. I stood on Claire's porch, looking out at Charleston's quiet street where ancient oaks swayed in the breeze. Logan stood beside me, silent, but his presence was a reminder that I wasn't alone. I had lost Thomas, lost Rachel, lost the life I thought was mine. But I had found something else. The strength of an American woman forged by the belief that justice isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. Rachel Gordon Crane. They might think I was just a broken widow, but I was Vivian Carter, and I would make them see that no one could manipulate or hurt me without paying a price. We weren't done. There was still a bank safe deposit box waiting, and I knew that what lay inside would be the final piece of the puzzle Thomas left behind. I stood on Claire's porch, the fading Charleston sunlight bathing the ancient oaks, but inside me a storm still raged. The bank key lay in my hand, cold and sharp, a reminder that I hadn't reached the end of Thomas's web of lies. After confronting Rachel, I felt stronger than ever, but I also knew Thomas's secrets ran deeper, more dangerous. Gordon Blake and Victor Crane were still out there lurking like shadows, waiting for a misstep from me or Logan. But I was no longer prey, I was the hunter. And today I would open the final safe deposit box to find the last piece of the puzzle. Logan sat beside me in the car, his eyes focused on the road ahead, but I knew his mind was racing too. Claire insisted on coming, sitting in the back, her eyes sharp as a soldier preparing for battle. If anything feels off, text me, she said, her voice half joking, half serious. And if they don't let you in, cry. No one refuses a crying woman at a bank. Logan gave a faint smile, but I didn't. I wasn't in the mood for jokes. Every step I took, every door I opened brought me closer to exposing the full truth, and I knew that truth could burn everything down. The Federal Trust Bank sat tucked between a law office and a historic building, so discreet you could pass it 100 times without noticing. But today it was the center of my world. We walked in the cold air of the bank's lobby, making me shiver. The safe deposit manager looked at the silver key, checked my paperwork, and raised an eyebrow. It's been years since anyone accessed this box, he said, his voice flat. It's registered under a shell company, Mercury South Holdings. I nodded, hiding my emotions, but inside that name rang like an alarm bell. We were led to the basement through security doors and cold concrete hallways. The air grew heavier, as if the building itself were guarding secrets. The manager handed me a pair of gloves, standard procedure, he said, then left us in the sealed room with the safe deposit box. I looked at Logan, who nodded, his eyes steady but tense. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I replied, but my hand still slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the box slid out with a low hum, as if whispering one final secret. I took a deep breath, opened the lid, and my heart stopped. No cash, no passports, no flashy items like in the movies. Just a hardcover file and a photograph. I picked up the photo, my fingers trembling. It was Thomas Logan Gordon Blake and Victor Crane standing in front of a black SUV, arms crossed, smiling brightly like old friends. But their smiles weren't joyful, they were the smug grins of men who thought they were untouchable. I stared at the photo so long my eyes stung. They weren't just business associates, I whispered. They were a team. Logan opened the file and we flipped through the pages together. Contracts, shell company, registrations, fake invoices, and a document that chilled me, marked in bold red ink. Crane Extortion Insurance. I flipped faster, my eyes scanning signatures, numbers, and meticulously recorded illegal transactions. This wasn't just evidence, it was a loaded gun, and Thomas had left it for me. He didn't just leave a mess, he left a weapon. I looked at Logan, seeing his eyes blaze with a mix of anger and resolve. Thomas kept everything, he said, his voice low. He knew they'd come for us. I nodded, feeling the final piece fall into place. Thomas wasn't just a betrayer, he was a chess player, always a few moves ahead, even when his opponents were his so-called friends. But now I held the pieces, and I wouldn't let Gordon Blake or Victor Crane think they could threaten me without paying a price. "We have everything we need to end this," I said, my voice stronger than ever. "They think we're weak, but they're wrong." Claire placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of pride. "You're not just a widow, Viv. You're a warrior." And in that moment, I felt it, not just the strength of a betrayed woman, but the pride of an American forged by the belief that no one has the right to use power to crush you. Thomas may have thought he could control everything, even in death. But I, Vivian Carter, was no longer his puppet. I was rewriting the rules. We left the bank, the file and photo safely tucked in Logan's bag. I gripped the key, not as a memento, but as a symbol of the strength I'd reclaimed. Gordon and Crane might think they held the power, but I had the evidence not just to protect myself, but to topple the world they'd built on lies. I looked out at Charleston's streets, where sunlight glinted off the trees, and I knew this battle wasn't over. But this time, I wasn't running. I would fight not just for myself, but for everyone hurt by men like them. Because that's what an American woman does. She never backs down, never gives up, and always rises to claim justice. I stood in the Federal Trust Bank, the file from the safe deposit box still heavy in Logan's hands, the photo of Thomas Gordon Crane and Logan himself, a reminder that my husband's web of lies wasn't just personal, it was an empire built on manipulation and power. But I was no longer the grieving widow trembling before those secrets. I was Vivian Carter, and I had turned the shards of betrayal into weapons. Yet I knew there was one final piece to uncover, a piece that could shape how I ended this story. Logan looked at me, his eyes both steady and wounded. "We need someone who knows the whole truth," he said. "There's a name my mother mentioned, Edward Holloway, Dad's college friend. She said he was the only one who always told Dad the truth, even when he didn't want to hear it." I nodded, feeling a new surge of adrenaline. "Then, we find him." We left Charleston that morning, driving 2 hours to Savannah, rain misting the windshield like streaks of memory. Savannah greeted us with shaded oaks and humid air, carrying the quiet charm of an old town. Edward Holloway's house emerged like something from a forgotten novel, its red brick covered in ivy, its windows fogged with mist. He opened the door, a tall man with silver hair and piercing eyes, as if he'd been expecting us for years. "You're Vivian," he said without hesitation. And you're Logan. You knew we'd come? I asked, my voice trembling at his certainty. He nodded, his eyes softening. Thomas said, if it all falls apart, they'll find you. He invited us in the house, thick with the smell of old paper and cigarette smoke. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a polished piano stood silently in the corner. Edward sat down, gesturing for us to do the same, then disappeared into another room. When he returned, he held a sealed envelope. Thomas left this, he said, to be opened only if both of you showed up. I looked at Logan, who nodded, and I tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a second will. I scanned the lines, my heart pounding. This will was different. It mentioned Rachel's unborn child, allocating 25% of Thomas's secret assets to the child, held in a trust until they turned 21. I felt the blood drain from my face. Thomas had planned for everything, even this. But what chilled me was the line, the unborn child of Rachel Carter. Not Rachel, but the child. He didn't trust her. Why didn't he leave it to Rachel? I asked Edward, my voice shaking. Because he trusted the child, Edward replied, his voice soft but sharp. Not the mother. Logan shifted, his eyes darkening. This changes everything, he said. It means Rachel can't touch that money, not legally. Edward nodded, pointing to the USB we'd brought from Thomas's office. If she tries, use that. From what Thomas told me, it contains detailed records of every transaction, every partner, every crime they committed to build this. I felt a surge of strength rise within me. Not just the strength of a betrayed woman, but the pride of an American forged by the belief that no one has the right to manipulate or steal your future. Rachel Gordon Crane. They were all part of the storm Thomas had built, but I was the one standing at its eye, and I wouldn't let it sweep me away. We returned to Charleston before noon, saying little on the drive. I knew this battle wasn't over, but I also knew I had changed. I was no longer the woman sitting in the kitchen with cold tea waiting for a husband who would never return. I had faced Rachel Gordon Crane, and now I held the evidence to bring them all down. But I also knew that true strength wasn't in destruction, it was in choosing how to move forward. I returned to my house one last time, walking through each room like a traveler bidding farewell to the past. I touched the backs of chairs, the door frames, the cracks in the hardwood we never fixed. In the closet, I packed a suitcase, leaving the rest behind. At the garage, I locked the door behind me, not to hide, but because I wouldn't be back. A week later, I boarded a flight to Colorado, where I'd rented a small house near the Rocky Mountains. No more secrets, no more safes, no more pretending. Just me, Vivian Carter, widow survivor, no longer defined by Thomas's lies. Under Colorado's vast sky with crisp air and towering peaks, I felt a freedom I'd never known. I had fought not just against those who betrayed me, but against the fear in my heart. I had stood up not for revenge, but to reclaim my life. And in that journey, I learned that justice isn't something you wait for, it's something you create step by step with courage and the pride of an American woman. Ajit lessons learned. This story proves one truth: when power goes too far, a woman with unwavering resolve can rewrite the rules. No one has the right to manipulate or steal your dignity, not even those you love most. Stand up, face the truth, and fight, because that's the American spirit, the spirit that never yields to injustice.